Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife ever did was laugh at me at our dining table, slide her phone across the wood, and let me read a man's message that said, "Tell him I'll be there after he leaves," before she looked me in the eye and said, "Marcus, I'm out of your league. Stop acting brand new." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I reached for the door and my keys because something in me understood that fighting for someone who enjoyed humiliating me would only teach her I was willing to stay in pain. Here's how it happened. I'm Marcus Reed, mid-30s, born in Baltimore, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a project manager for a municipal contractor. Early mornings, job sites, schedules that don't care about your personal life. I'm not flashy. I keep my voice level because I have lived long enough to know how quickly people decide what a black man must be if he shows emotion. Simone and I have been married 6 years. We were not a loud couple. We were steady. Meal prep Sundays. Shared Costco runs. Mortgage autopay. Our love looked ordinary, which I used to think was the point. Simone worked in corporate recruiting for a large health system. She was sharp and polished, the kind of woman who could speak calmly and still control a room. When we were dating, she used to call me her piece. She said she loved how consistent I was, how I did not make promises I could not keep. I believed her. I thought consistency was a language and we were fluent. The first years of our marriage were not perfect, but they were honest. We argued about chores and time and whose turn it was to call the plumber. Nothing felt dangerous. Then her circle changed, and the air in our home changed with it. It started with her friend Kendra. Kendra was newly divorced, newly loud, and newly committed to explaining her divorce like it was a masterclass. She would come over with wine and a playlist and that performative laugh that filled every corner of our living room. She spoke about standards and high-value men, like she had discovered a secret society. Simone leaned in the way people do when they want to believe something because it flatters them. Kendra didn't say Simone should cheat at first. She just suggested Simone deserved more than basic. More attention, more luxury, more worship. At first, Simone repeated Kendra's phrases like jokes. Soft life, level up, options. She would say them while scrolling through her phone, smiling at content that made marriage sound like a bargain sale. I would laugh lightly because I didn't want to be the husband who polices his wife's friendships. Then the jokes gained edges. She started commenting on my clothes, not as style advice, but as a verdict. She asked why I drove my paid-off truck when men who were really doing it drove something else. It was never a discussion. It was always a comparison I didn't volunteer to enter. Our routine still looked normal from the outside. I left before sunrise, grabbed coffee near the yard, checked the day's deliverables, managed crews, and solved problems that were concrete enough to fix. Simone left later, makeup perfect, blazer pressed, perfume that used to be soft and familiar but started to smell sharper over time. We texted about groceries and schedules. She asked if the lawn service came. I asked if the mortgage draft hit. But there was a new coldness behind her words, like she was speaking to a coworker she planned to outperform, not a husband she planned to grow old with. One night, she came home excited in a way I hadn't seen in months. She told me Kendra invited her to a women's dinner in South End, Charlotte, an upscale place with valet parking and a menu that looked like a dare. Simone described the table. Women in heels, confidence like armor, phones face down like they had secrets to protect. She said it was empowering. She said it was expanding her mind. I told her I was glad she had friends. I'm in it. But later, when she went to shower, I looked at the receipt she left on the counter by accident. $260 on cocktails and networking. I did not confront her about it. I told myself it was a one-off. Everyone deserved a night out. The next week, there was another dinner. Then brunch. Then a conference in Raleigh that had no company itinerary. When I asked questions, Simone didn't provide answers. She provided attitude. "Do you want me to send you a calendar invite for my life?" she said once. Another time she asked, "Why are you acting insecure?" Like curiosity was a confession. It messed with my head because I was not an insecure man by nature. I had simply never been married to someone who treated basic respect like a favor. The first time she mentioned changing our boundaries, it was almost casual. We were folding laundry, and she said, "You ever think people were not meant to be with one person forever?" I thought she was being philosophical. I answered carefully, "I think commitment is a choice. It's what makes a marriage. She smirked like I said something naive. Later that night, she sent me a link to an article about open marriages. The subject line in her message was, "Read this with an open mind." It sounded harmless, but the way she watched me read it felt like a test I didn't consent to take. A few days after that, she brought it up directly. We were eating leftovers, and she said, "What if we allowed each other options?" I put my fork down. I told her no. I said I married her because I wanted her, not a rotating door. Simone didn't argue the concept. She attacked my character. "That's your problem," she said. "You think love is possession. You think you can keep me contained because you pay the bills on time." I told her my boundary wasn't containment. It was agreement. She smiled like my boundary was a weakness she could push until it cracked. After that conversation, Simone started moving like a woman who had already made a decision and was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Her phone became a private country. She turned off notifications. She took calls in the car. She would laugh softly at messages and then wipe her face blank when I walked in. She stayed late, at work more often, then came home showered as if she had used a gym locker room, hair still damp, and said she didn't want to wake me. Meanwhile, our home felt less like a shared life and more like a place we both happened to sleep, separately, silently, without warmth. The first real punch was financial. We had a joint account for bills and savings and separate personal accounts for spending. We were not reckless people. We were not rich, but we were stable. Then I noticed the joint savings dipping in small bites. Not enough to trigger an overdraft, but enough to change the math. 200 here, 400 there. Charges that didn't look like groceries, utilities, or anything for the house. When I asked, Simone didn't even flinch. "Work reimbursements," she said. "I'll move it back." She never did. When I brought it up again, she said, "Stop monitoring me. You're not my father." I started sleeping lightly. I would wake up to the glow of her phone in bed and pretend I was still asleep. Sometimes she would get up and leave the room, whispering in the hallway like she was afraid of waking a child, not a husband. I hate that I did this, but I began living in small humiliations, counting the minutes between her messages, watching her smile at her screen, reading the mood in her voice the way you read the sky for storms. I knew something was wrong, but I still wanted to believe it was fixable. I kept reaching for normal, dinner, weekend plans, a movie, while she kept reaching away. The first confirmation didn't come from my own detective work. It came from my neighbor. Tasha lived across the street, a single mom with a calm demeanor, the kind of person who waved, kept her yard neat, and did not involve herself in anyone's mess. One Tuesday night, Simone said she had a team dinner uptown. She left in a black dress I'd never seen, heels in her hand, makeup done like she was going somewhere important. About an hour later, Tasha texted me, "Marcus, I don't want to be messy, but your wife just got into a Range Rover that wasn't an Uber." They hugged for a long time. I stared at that message until my eyes blurred. I wanted to reject it like my brain could veto reality. I wrote back, "Thank you." Seriously, that was all I could manage. I did not ask more because I could feel myself on the edge of something ugly. Rage, shame, panic. That night, I paced my living room, stopping at the window like a person waiting for evidence to arrive on schedule. Simone came home smelling like a hotel lobby, citrus, expensive soap, cold air conditioning. She walked in with a satisfied glow and asked, "Why are you up?" Like I was the strange one for being awake in my own life. I asked her directly, "Are you seeing someone?" I expected denial, outrage, tears, something human. Simone exhaled as if I was exhausting, then said, "I'm exploring. I told you I need options." I asked if she slept with him. She didn't answer yes or no. She said, "You're making this dramatic." She turned it into my personality flaw. "You want me to be small so you feel big," she said. It was so backward I almost laughed. Then she said the line that later echoed in my head like a gavel. "I'm out of your league." I always have been. No remorse. No softness. Just superiority delivered calmly. That was the night I reached for the door. Not to run forever, not yet. To keep myself from unraveling in front of her like a show. I stepped onto the porch and let the night air hit my face. The neighborhood was quiet, distant TV sounds, a dog barking once, a car passing. My hand shook. I hated that. I breathed until the shaking slowed. I told myself one thing. I would not become the loud, desperate stereotype she wanted to paint. If I had to lose my marriage, I would lose it with my dignity intact. I went back inside, said nothing, and slept on the edge of the bed like a guest. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. Hard hat, boots, clipboard, coffee that tasted like metal. But my mind was different. Something had shifted from denial to calculation. I started paying attention the way I pay attention to a job schedule. Dates, patterns, resources, risk. I called a family law attorney during lunch, sitting in my truck with the engine off. I did not tell anyone, no friends, no family, because I wasn't ready to carry their opinions on top of my own pain. I just told the lawyer I wanted a clean exit, not drama. She said, then move quietly and document everything. I began documenting like my peace depended on it, because it did. I downloaded bank statements and flagged the charges that didn't fit. I took screenshots of suspicious transactions, hotel deposits, upscale restaurants nowhere near her office. I froze my credit. I opened a new account and routed my direct deposit there. I changed passwords on anything tied to my name. I learned what accounts were jointly liable and what wasn't. It felt surreal, like I was building shelter while still living in the burning house. Simone kept acting like she was in charge of the narrative. I refused to argue. I let her talk. People reveal themselves when you stop interrupting. Over the next few weeks, Simone got bolder. She stopped hiding the late nights. She stopped pretending her phone wasn't full of secrets. If I asked where she was, she would say, out, like my marriage didn't earn details. When I tried to talk about counseling, she laughed. Therapy is for men who can't accept reality, she said. I'm not going to sit in a room and pretend I don't have options just so you can feel secure. She started dressing differently, more expensive, more deliberate. New perfume, new nails, new hair appointments. She was investing in herself, and she was using our shared stability as the launch pad without permission. Meanwhile, her friend Kendra kept showing up like gasoline. Kendra would sit on my couch and talk about marriage like it was a temporary contract, something you upgrade when it stops serving you. Simone soaked it up. They spoke in coded language, laughing at men who think they own women. I never said I owned anyone. I wanted partnership, not ownership. But they needed me to be the villain so Simone could justify what she was doing without guilt. The cruelty was how normal Simone acted while saying cruel things. She'd pour cereal and casually say, "You should be grateful I even married you," like it was a compliment wrapped in a knife. The high-status person revealed himself in a small, stupid way, carelessness. Simone left her laptop open on the kitchen counter one night while she showered. A calendar reminder popped up with a name I recognized from local news and hospital fundraisers. Dr. Julian Carr, cardiothoracic surgeon, philanthropic board member, polished in every photo. The invite wasn't for work. It was a private reservation at a downtown restaurant known for quiet deals and expensive wine. I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't just that she was cheating. It was who she chose, someone whose status she could hold over me like proof I was beneath her. I took a picture with my phone, hand steady, heartbreaking. I didn't confront her about the laptop. I didn't want her to hide the trail. I began watching for patterns instead. She would work late on certain days. She would leave earlier on others. She had a new habit of showering at odd times, like she wanted to wash the day off before she let it touch our bed. I noticed she started keeping a small overnight bag in the trunk, unremarkable black duffel. I noticed she changed her underwear drawer organization, like she was managing two lives. I noticed she stopped using our shared calendar for anything personal. She wanted freedom without accountability, and she wanted me to fund it quietly. The part that hurts the most is that I still tried. I still cooked dinner. I still asked if she wanted to watch a show. I still folded laundry. I still paid bills. My love didn't switch off just because hers did. That is what made the suffering constant, living in the same home with someone who had emotionally left while pretending for the sake of normal. Sometimes Simone would be kind for an hour, just enough to confuse me. Then she'd pull back and treat my hope like a weakness. "You're too steady," she told me once. "It's boring. Men like Julian don't have time to be boring." I nodded as if she was talking about weather. Then I went outside and sat in my truck until my breathing slowed. The only place I felt treated like a person was in small moments with Tasha. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. One evening, a storm knocked my trash can over, and I was in the yard picking up scattered paper like my life was literally blowing around. Tasha came out without a word, picked up what she could, and handed it to me. She didn't ask questions. Another time, she knocked to return a package delivered to her porch and said, "You look tired." Her voice wasn't pity. It was recognition. I didn't dump my pain on her. I just said, "I'm going through something." She nodded and said, "I'm around if you need a calm minute." Simone started testing how far she could push me. She'd come home late and climb into bed like nothing happened. She'd touch my arm and say, "Don't start," before I said a word. She'd mention open marriage again like it was inevitable. "This is happening," she told me. "You could be smart and accept it, or you could be dramatic and lose me." I looked at her and realized she thought I was afraid of losing her. The truth was I was afraid of losing myself. I asked her, "So your plan is to cheat and call it options?" She shrugged. "Call it whatever you want. It's my life. No remorse." She also started subtly undermining me to people. I would hear little comments when we met friends for dinner. "Marcus is so traditional," Simone would say with a laugh. "He's sensitive. He needs reassurance." She made it sound like a harmless personality quirk, but it was narrative building. I saw it when her mother called and asked if I was stressing Simone out. I saw it when her cousin in Baltimore joked about me being controlling. I wasn't controlling. I was being controlled by someone rewriting reality. I felt alone in a crowded room because Simone had already started planting the idea that I was the problem. The deeper suffering came from how she acted at home. She didn't just cheat. She enjoyed making me feel small. She would correct me mid-sentence like I was a child. She would walk into a room, see me relax for 2 seconds, and say something sharp like she couldn't stand me being calm. One night I asked if she wanted to talk, just talk, and she said, "Talk about what?" "You're not going to become Julian by talking." I remember staring at her and thinking, this woman knows exactly what she is doing. She wants to bruise me where it won't show in public. She wants me broken enough to accept anything. That was when I fully committed to a quiet exit. My lawyer guided me through the practical steps. I made a list of shared assets and liabilities. I ensured the mortgage payment remained current, so I wouldn't sabotage myself. I documented the pattern of spending and the timing of her absences. I moved important documents, birth certificate, passport, the deed copies, into a small lockbox in my office. I changed beneficiaries on my work accounts where allowed. I did it all without announcing it, because announcing it would give Simone time to manipulate, drain, or distort. Quiet was my armor. I began speaking to Simone only about logistics. The less emotion I gave her, the more she seemed irritated. She fed on reaction. I starved that appetite. Simone noticed the calm and started escalating. She would pick fights over nothing, dirty dishes, the thermostat, a towel on the floor, then accuse me of being cold when I didn't argue back. "You're acting like you're better than me," she snapped once. I wanted to say, "I'm acting like a man who is trying not to collapse." Instead, I said, "I'm tired." She rolled her eyes. "You're always tired. That's why you're not attractive," she said, like attraction was a weapon she could use to punish me. That sentence landed heavier than it should have. Not because I needed her validation, but because she wanted to take it away with cruelty. At work, I became efficient in a way that scared me. I could stand in front of crews and talk about timelines while my marriage was burning. I'd go home and see Simone's car in the driveway and feel dread like a physical weight. I started eating less. I started waking up too early. Sometimes I'd sit in a parking lot after work and stare at nothing, trying to build the courage to walk back into my own house. That is the part people don't understand about betrayal. The cheating hurts, but the daily exposure to contempt changes you. You start negotiating with your own worth. You start wondering what you did wrong to be treated like a joke. I had to fight that internal erosion quietly. One night, Simone left her phone on the counter when she went upstairs. I didn't want to be the man who snoops, but I also didn't want to be the man who refuses to see what's killing him. The screen lit up with a message preview. Julian, I don't like sharing. Handle your situation. That wasn't romance. That was power. That was him treating her like a convenience and her treating me like the obstacle. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. I took a picture of the preview, then put the phone back exactly where it was. My hands didn't shake. My heart did. I went to the garage, sat in the dark, and let the pain run through me like a storm. A week later, Simone tried to rewrite our marriage publicly. We flew to Baltimore for her aunt's family cookout. Everybody was outside, music low, kids running around, ribs and chicken on the grill. Simone was in a good mood, which should have made me happy. Instead, it made me suspicious, because her happiness often came at my expense. While I carried trays to the table, I heard her speaking to her cousin near the patio. Marcus is sweet, she said, laughing, but I can't shrink my life for a man comfortable being average. I need a man who can keep up. People laughed like it was harmless. I felt my face go hot, then cold. Simone saw me listening and did not care. She was proud. That night in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and realized I was watching my own dignity erode in real time. I texted my lawyer, I'm ready. I want the next steps. She replied with a checklist and a timeline. It should have felt empowering. It felt like grief with paperwork. The next morning, Simone acted cheerful, as if she hadn't humiliated me in front of her family. On the drive back to Charlotte, she played music and scrolled through her phone, smiling at messages she didn't share. I stared out the window and reminded myself, I am not crazy. I am not too sensitive. I am in a marriage with someone who uses contempt as entertainment. Leaving is not failure. Staying would be self-abandonment. Back home, I prepared to move without drama. I found a small apartment in a quieter part of Charlotte, closer to my job sites. I didn't want luxury. I wanted peace. I signed the lease and scheduled utilities. I packed slowly, important things first, sentimental things last, because every item I touched reminded me of a version of us that no longer existed. Simone didn't notice at first because she was busy living her second life. When she finally saw boxes, she didn't ask, Are you okay? She asked, What are you doing? Like I was committing a crime against her convenience. I said, I'm getting organized. She narrowed her eyes, suddenly alert because control slipping always wakes up people like Simone. That's when she started panicking. Not sad panicking, strategic panicking. She began calling more often during the day, not to connect, but to check my location. She would text, Where are you? Then follow up with, Why aren't you answering? She tried to initiate intimacy at odd times, like she thought physical access could reset the scoreboard. I refused politely without anger. That made her furious. So now you're punishing me? She said. I said, I'm protecting myself. She laughed like that was ridiculous. You think you could just leave and I'll care? She said. But her eyes told Steenie it. She didn't even pretend. She lifted her chin and said, It's not your business. Her father's face hardened like stone. In that moment, Simone realized her charm didn't work on everyone. She tried to pivot to attacking me. He's controlling, she said. He tracks my spending. He's insecure, I answered calmly. I protected our finances because you were using them to fund a relationship outside our marriage. I stood up, placed cash on the table to cover my portion of the meal, and nodded respectfully at her parents. I won't argue here, I said. I'm moving out tonight. My lawyer will handle the rest. Simone's eyes flashed. So you're just quitting? She said, loud enough for people nearby to glance over. I leaned closer and said softly, I stopped participating in humiliation. That's not quitting. I walked out. No speech. No raised voice. My heart was pounding like a drum, but my steps were steady. Outside, the air felt colder, cleaner. I sat in my truck for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, and realized I could breathe again. Simone called me before I even got home. Her voice was sharp, furious. You did that on purpose, she said. I said, I did it to end this cleanly. She laughed bitter. You think you're so calm, but you're just petty, she said. You can't handle that I'm out of your league. I said, if you believe that, then you shouldn't mind me leaving. Silence, then anger. She wasn't sad. She was losing something she valued. Control, stability, a safety net. She tried to threaten me. I can make this ugly, she said. I replied, then you'll make a public record you can't charm. That ended the call. That night, I moved essential items into my apartment. I did not empty the house like a thief. I took what was mine, what mattered, and left the rest for the legal process. Simone arrived while I was carrying a box. She stood in the doorway and watched, arms crossed, eyes cold. So this is what you're doing, she said. Running. I said, leaving. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was trying to trigger me. Julian doesn't run from problems, she said. I looked at her and said, Julian isn't married to you. Her face twisted, not with shame, but with rage that I wasn't begging. She said, you will regret this. I said, I already regret staying as long as I did. The next week for paperwork, silence, and small shocks. Simone tried to use the joint account one more time for a large withdrawal, but the safeguards were already in place. She called furious. You froze me out, she said. I said, you drained us without permission. I protected what was left. She called me names. She blamed me for everything. No remorse. My lawyer filed formally, and the process moved like a machine, slow but inevitable. Simone's pride couldn't accept that she wasn't the one ending things on her terms. She began texting me late at night, not to reconcile, but to provoke. He's better, she wrote once. He actually sees me. I stopped responding. Silence was my boundary. Karma did not come as fireworks. It came as reality catching up. Dr. Julian Carr did not claim her the way Simone believed he would. The relationship that felt thrilling in secrecy looked inconvenient in daylight. Once Simone became legally complicated, separation filings, financial questions, potential workplace exposure, Julian's warmth cooled. Simone started coming home earlier on nights she used to disappear. She started staring at her phone more, frustrated instead of glowing. One evening she texted me, "You told him, didn't you?" I replied, "I told my family by marriage the truth. That's all." She responded with a long string of accusations. Then, for the first time, she wrote something honest without meaning to. He doesn't want problems. Exactly. Cheating partners love the fantasy, not the fallout. The second piece of karma was professional and completely predictable. Simone's spending and scheduling irregularities drew attention once the wrong conversation reached the wrong person. In recruiting, integrity matters, and so does perception. A complaint landed in compliance. Something about favoritism, conflict of interest, questionable reimbursements. I don't know who filed it. It could have been a coworker tired of Simone's attitude. It could have been someone who noticed she was moving like a person above rules. It could have been a natural consequence of arrogance. What I do know is that Simone called me one afternoon, furious and scared at the same time. "They're asking questions," she said. I said, "Then answer them truthfully." She snapped, "They're trying to ruin me." I said, "No, Simone. You did the risky part. Now the risk is collecting its debt." She didn't get a dramatic firing with security escort. She got something colder, a quiet separation, the kind companies do when they want distance without noise. Simone told her family a story that made her a victim. She said they were targeting her. She said people were jealous. She never said, "I made choices." Meanwhile, Dr. Carr disappeared like a man who never planned to stay. Simone tried to reach him and got delayed responses, then no responses. She started posting motivational quotes online about being misunderstood. She started dressing down, not because she learned humility, but because her audience shrank. That is the thing about status built on external validation. It collapses when the crowd leaves. The saddest part was watching her still refuse remorse. Even after everything, papers served, marriage ending, job slipping, Simone didn't apologize. She only blamed me for not being strong enough to keep her. "If you were more ambitious, I wouldn't have needed options," she said on one of her last phone calls. I laughed once, quietly, because it was so cruel it almost sounded scripted. I said, "We didn't need options. You needed control." She said, "Whatever helps you sleep." Then she hung up. That was Simone to the end. Contempt as a shield, pride as a prison. I realized then that if I had stayed, I would have spent my life trying to earn basic respect from someone who thought disrespect was a sign of power. In my new apartment, the peace felt unfamiliar at first. The silence wasn't loneliness. It was the absence of tension. I bought a cheap couch and a small table. I kept the blinds open because I hated feeling boxed in. I started running again in the mornings, slow and steady, the way you rebuild a body after it's been carrying too much. I ate real meals instead of stomach-knot snacks. I started sleeping through the night. The grief came in waves, certain songs, certain smells, certain memories. But the grief was clean. It wasn't mixed with daily contempt. That made it survivable. Tasha stayed steady in the same simple ways. Sometimes we talked on the porch in the evenings, not about Simone, not about drama, just about life, work stress, raising kids, neighborhood issues, what we planned to cook. When I did mention the divorce, Tasha didn't celebrate it. She didn't turn it into a gossip session. She just said, "I'm sorry you went through that," and then, "I'm proud you left before it changed you into someone you don't recognize." That mattered. She wasn't saving me. She wasn't a sudden romance twist. She was a reminder that kindness can exist without conditions, and that not every relationship requires you to shrink. The final layer of karma was social, and it arrived quietly. Simone's family, once they saw documents and patterns, stopped treating her story as fact. They didn't publicly shame her. They simply withdrew their automatic support of her narrative. Invitations softened. Calls became shorter. Her father, once proud, became distant. Simone noticed and tried to blame me for that too. "You turned them against me," she said. I said no. I told the truth once. Your choices did the rest. That was the most satisfying part. Not because I wanted her punished, but because I wanted reality to be real again. I wanted a world where someone couldn't mistreat you and then demand you carry the consequences alone. Months later, when the paperwork was nearly finalized, Simone tried one last time to regain control. She called late at night and said, "You really think you're going to do better than me?" Her voice was sharp, but it had a small crack of desperation. I realized she wasn't asking about love. She was asking about hierarchy. She needed to believe she was above me to justify everything. I answered calmly, "This isn't about doing better than you. It's about doing better for me." She laughed, but sounded forced. "You'll miss me," she said. I said, "I miss who I thought you were." Then I ended the call. That was my private peace. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. The twist, if there is one, is that I did not become famous, rich overnight, or publicly praised. I did not make a speech. I did not went on social media. I won in private. I kept my dignity. I kept my finances intact. I kept my record clean. I learned to trust my instincts again. Simone never offered remorse, and I stopped needing it. Her "out of your league" line became meaningless once I realized love is not a league. It's a choice. She chose contempt. I chose the door. And on the other side of that door, I found a life that didn't require me to beg for respect in my own home. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.